You ever wonder if real-life superpowers could actually exist? I'm not talking about the comic book stuff, but, incredible abilities that are rooted in our own genetics. Well, it turns out they kind of do. But as we're about to find out, in the world of biology, pretty much every gift comes with a price tag.
Our source material really hits the nail on the head here. See, most genetic mutations are either totally harmless or they get weeded out pretty quickly by nature. But then there's this tiny, tiny faction that creates these incredible, really visible traits that, honestly, look just like superpowers. We're talking things like unbreakable bones or complete immunity to pain.
And this table? This is the core idea of our whole explainer, right here. What looks like an amazing superpower on the surface. Well, it usually has a hidden clinical diagnosis and a really serious biological cost. And today, we're going to zero in on a fascinating one, those striking violet eyes. Turns out, they're actually a symptom of something called oculocutaneous albinism, and they come at a huge cost to a person's vision.
Okay, so to really get why a lack of color can be so devastating, we've got to do a super quick dive into how our bodies create color in the first place.
The number one way is with biological pigments. Think of these as tiny molecules that soak up some wavelengths of light and bounce others away. So, and this is the key thing, the color you're actually seeing is the light that the pigment didn't absorb. It's literally the leftover light that's reflecting back into your eye.
Now, that's totally different from the other method, which is structural color. That's what you see in like peacock feathers or butterfly wings, where it's all shimmery. That's not pigment. That's microscopic structures that are physically scattering light to create that iridescent look. But we're sticking with pigments today, because when that system fails, oh man, the consequences are severe.
All right, so what's actually happening on a genetic level when this color-making machinery just breaks down?
And that leads us straight to albinism. It's a condition someone's born with, and it's all defined by the absence of one very specific pigment, melanin. Melanin is the main stuff that gives color to our hair, our skin, and our eyes, and its absence is exactly what sets the stage for those violet eyes.
So, how does this failure even happen? Well, it's a pretty simple three-step chain reaction. First, you've got a gene called TYR. Think of it as the blueprint for an important enzyme. Second, that enzyme is supposed to work inside these cellular factories to pump out melanin. But, and here's the kicker, if that initial blueprint, the TYR gene, is damaged, the factory can't make the enzyme right, and so it can't produce melanin. The whole assembly line just grinds to a halt.
And that genetic failure is what leads directly to our so-called superpower. This specific condition, oculocutaneous albinism type 1A, or just OCA1A for short, causes a near-total shutdown in melanin production. And it's this extreme lack of pigment that creates that violet eye appearance.
But, like we talked about earlier, this absolutely stunning visual trait, it comes at an incredibly high price. This isn't a gift. It's a massive biological trade-off.
Which of course brings us right back to the big question we've been building up to. After everything we've just gone through, are these incredibly rare, beautiful eyes really a superpower?
The answer, from a strictly biological standpoint, is not even close. They're not a power at all. They're the external sign of a deep, functional failure happening inside the visual system.
Here's the most critical piece of this whole puzzle. Melanin isn't just for color, it's actually a crucial building block for developing the eye itself. Without it, the retina and the optic nerve just can't form properly. This means the violet color you see isn't a new pigment. It's actually the red from the blood vessels in the back of the eye showing straight through a completely clear, unpigmented iris. And to put a hard number on it, for people with albinism, the density of those really important nerve cells right in the center of the retina is about 25% lower than normal. I mean, that is a massive structural problem. And the research is clear. OCA1A, the exact condition linked to violet eyes, is associated with the most severe vision problems out of all the types of albinism. The superpower is directly tied to the worst possible visual outcome.
So let's zoom out for a second. Why does biology even work this way? Why aren't these extreme traits more common if they seem so cool on the surface? Well, it all comes down to evolution's great balancing act.
You know, the simple reason these so-called superpowers are so incredibly rare is because, for the most part, they're actually bad for you. In the cold, hard math of survival, any tiny advantage they might offer is almost always completely wiped out by a catastrophic disadvantage.
And this isn't just about violet eyes. This rule applies to all of them. Take immunity to pain. Sounds great, right? But you might not notice a broken bone.
or a raging infection until it's way too late. You could even be freezing to death and not even feel the cold. And those unbreakable bones, as they keep getting denser, they can start to dangerously compress your brain and the nerves in your skull, which can lead to facial paralysis or even deafness. And all that extra muscle? It often results in muscles that are bigger, sure, but they're also functionally weaker. They lack fine control, and they're prone to awful cramping.
There's actually a scientific name for this whole phenomenon. It's called pleiotropy. It's basically when a single change to one little gene has all these different cascading effects all over the body, effects that might seem totally unrelated. One broken part can mess up the entire system in some really unexpected ways.
And this, right here, is the ultimate takeaway. Our bodies are just these incredibly complex, interconnected systems. You can't just crank one single trait up to the max, like muscle size or bone density, without having to pay a price somewhere else in the system. Evolution doesn't build superheroes. It builds balanced, efficient systems that, just work.
So that leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. The next time you hear about some seemingly perfect biological trait, it's probably worth asking yourself, what's the hidden cost? What's the evolutionary price tag that we're just not seeing?